Welcome to Saints on Cinema. I'm Tim Wild.
And I'm Josh Edlow.
And tonight we're doing our review of Two Witnesses discussing Cobra Kai episodes 5 and 6. I had to count them out there. And in this episode, we'll be talking about the episodes Counterbalance and Quiver. And before we go any further, I just want to say Counterbalance, I think, is my favorite episode. So I'm excited to do this review. I just want to apologize right here again. I'm in transition of moving and relocating, and right now the internet where I'm filming is not the best, so I apologize for the pixelated, delayed video that you're getting here. But anyway, before we get into the review, Josh, I want to ask you, did you notice the couple things that YouTube has done with this Cobra Kai channel, or the episode? How, for example, if you pause it, it has a little arm come out from the side and it says wax on. Or it says wax off, and then when you unpause it, it says wax on. Have you noticed that?
I haven't noticed that, but I have noticed in other episodes, like if you hit pause, on top of it, they have like a little karate guy and things like that. You notice that?
Yeah, where you have the little marker where you are on the episode, the little play gauge, whatever that's called. Yeah, the little cursor where the guy is, the little guy doing the crane kick. I think that's hilarious. I just like that fun little detail that YouTube Red's doing. So if anyone from YouTube Red is watching this, or YouTube is watching this, that's awesome. So I love that little detail, except for this. When the little arm comes out for the wax on, wax off thing, I'll try and do it correctly for the camera, but the arm is a left arm, and it comes out on the bottom left corner. And if you pause it, it says, I think it says wax off, and the arm goes like this. Or no, it goes like this. But then when you resume, it goes in. And there was no inward motion for, well, it's on the floor, wasn't it? On the floor? But they're wax on and wax off.
Yes.
There was no wax on.
Wax on, wax off were the outers, and sand the floor were the inners.
Yeah. Yeah. So it should say wax off and then sand the floor if they wanted to be detailed. But yeah, there was no wax on or off. That was an inward motion.
Or have wax off and then the other arm doing wax on, something like that. That would have been more historically accurate. Thanks a lot, YouTube.
They ruined that. All right. We have already said wax off way too much. So let's move on with our review.
Gonna have to talk to our bishop soon.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, but those little details are just really cool. So I'm really enjoying this YouTube stuff. But Counterbalance, let's get into it. I love this episode. I think Counterbalance is my favorite one because this is the encapsulation of anything or any old ladies movie that had like a good action sequence, a good montage, good music, all those things that you saw, story development. If you go back to the original Karate Kid series, those moments that you really remember, other than the final fight, had the development of the characters, their growth, the lessons that they were learning, the montages, the training, the progress you were watching the characters go through. Everything, all those things are all put in this one little episode, including the scene with Miyagi. Well, not with Miyagi, but the scene where it acknowledges Miyagi, where Daniel's going through his internal struggles. All of that's on this 1.5 hour episode. This is my favorite episode.
So I like what you're saying there. I think it's true. The score, like the first thing you see when you pop into episode 5 with Counterbalance is he wakes up, he puts on his earphones, and he's immediately playing like this 80s rock training montage music, and he starts doing push-ups, and the training montage is just really awesome. I found it to be a lot more like a Rocky montage than a Karate Kid montage. Because the Karate Kid montages were typically more, kind of almost like a Zen Buddha balance.
Right. It was more a montage to show a part of his training. It wasn't like an overall training. And there's a right and a wrong way to do a montage. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think that was the thing. I think that this more of a Rocky montage is more in line with the Cobra Kai way of karate than it is with Miyagi-Do way of karate. So I thought it was appropriate.
Are you saying because it's like a little more fighting, a little more physical activity, more strength development?
Yeah, I think so.
Instead of just technique?
Sure, it's more strike hard in your face, like you're training for a fight more than training to defend yourself type thing. So
Well, here's the thing, and I agree with that. I'm not going to argue that, but this is what I love about this montage at the beginning. It's a training montage. We know a montage is a bunch of small clips that show a passage of time in a short period during the episode or the movie. And a training montage, in my mind, there's right and wrong ways to do it, like I said, where you want to see development and you want to see where he's learning. You want to see weakness building into strength in the montage. Sometimes you watch a montage where all it does, an example is the Zorro montage from Zorro, The Mask of Zorro, the first one, where he has his training sequence, then that little montage where he's training. In that one, all you do is see him either, you see him learn like 4 different activities, and he either fails or is successful. You never see him do it where he's doing the push-up, he's struggling, where he's swinging around the ropes and everything. All the few little things he does struggling. A really good, effective montage to me has each of the activities he's doing, like running or doing push-ups or sparring with Johnny in this one, and then dodging the tennis balls and everything. But then you see him struggling and getting beat up, and then you see him working through it and then getting better and then being successful. A good montage shows that progression. This one was a good one. Like you say, he starts doing the push-ups in the beginning and he's struggling, but then that transitions right into him doing the push-ups in the dojo. And just from 2 episodes ago, it was, Johnny was teasing that he couldn't even do push-ups. And then you see him going running, and that's a traditional karate or Rocky thing. Or sidekicks did a lot of running in that one. You saw that with the rock music and everything, and then you saw him in the sparring. You saw him getting beat up. You saw him squirming. He couldn't get out of the locks that Johnny had Miguel in.
No
and everything was just working towards a point. Go ahead.
The no tapping in karate. I thought that was great.
That was hilarious. He had him locked, and he's like, "Hey, what do you do?" He's like, "There's no tapping in karate." It's like, but he made a comment though about the Cobra, and I can't remember what he said. He said, "What would a Cobra do?" or something like that. He's trying to teach him how to slither and get out of it.
Right.
And it's a very effective thing that also is talking about their lives. Especially where he starts abusing them later on in the episodes. They need to adapt and just get out of it in some kind of a non-traditional way, just some way to get out of it. And that's I think a survival thing.
You know what else I thought was interesting? In the training montage with the tennis balls in particular, he's learning how to do it all, and towards the end, he's actually figured out how to block, and he's messing with Johnny, sparring with him, and he actually takes him down. He's all excited, and then the tennis ball hits him in the back of the head. And it's a funny moment that he does that. I thought it was kind of funny, and then he looks at him, and he's got his ears all bruised or whatever, and he's like, "You're fine. It's no big. Quit being a baby." But I thought what was interesting was he goes, you can't always expect your enemies to fight fair. Imagine that was one of your opponent's friends coming in from behind, which was interesting because in the fight that happens in there, he has that exact same experience and he's ready for it. So
and that's the other great thing is there's a complete payoff in the montage where something that's going to happen later in foreshadowing. And you're right. As soon as he takes down Kyler, the fat kid comes up behind him, and the show actually goes into slow motion as he's swinging in behind him, and he ducks and dodges the attack, and he turns and counters him. That was exactly what the tennis ball moment was about, even though it was hilarious. I agree with that. Yeah, it was just so well done, and the music and everything on top of it, it felt like an 80s action movie montage. It was real good. Anyway.
I also thought, speaking of funny things, I thought the comedy really continued in this, especially when Aisha Robinson ends up joining the Cobra Kai. When she comes in and he's like, when he goes, "Sorry, there's no girls in Cobra Kai," and he goes, "Why not?" He goes, "Same reason there's no girls in the army." He's like, "They have tiny hollow bones." I love that. I love that reaction. And when he's talking about that also, there's another appeal to the original movie where he tells Miguel when he's like, "Why can't she join?" He says, "Because this is not a knitting class, this is a dojo," which is the exact same thing that John Kreese says to Miyagi when Miyagi says it's time to, we're not, no more fighting. And he says, "This is a dojo, not a knitting class. You don't come in and drop a challenge and leave," So you can see that Johnny's training and his development is still being informed by what he learned from John Kreese. There's little nuggets, and I also found it interesting that comes in at the same episode that you see Mr. Miyagi's biggest presence in the show.
Right.
Is that the gravesite? And I loved the gravesite scene. I thought that was, in this episode, Daniel's at his douchiest. In this episode, this is where he gets really bad, because this is where he's trying to go behind Johnny's back to try to work with Armand, who I loved Armand, the character, the guy who owned the strip mall. I thought he was really funny. I love that he got kicked out of the Encino Country Club because he beat the shower. I thought that was pretty funny. But here he's trying to go behind him, and I wanted to bring that up because I find it very interesting that he is kind of going behind everyone's back and in the shadows and trying to kind of back end get Johnny Lawrence get Cobra Kai kicked out of the strip mall at the same time when Johnny's having the reaction to Aisha Robinson's bullying. If you remember, she comes in and she talks about all these people who are coming in, and I loved his reaction.
The cyberbullying, yeah.
Because at first he feels like he's got sympathy for her, and then he's like, "What a bunch of pansies," And he talks about, and this also I think informs Johnny's point of view when he's picking on Daniel, because he goes, "In my day, when you picked on somebody, you picked on them to their face. There was honor involved in it, right? Like it was honorable. It was something that it was something respectful about it," which was interesting because Mr. Miyagi says when he first starts training Daniel, and Daniel says, "Do you really think I can compete with those guys?" He says, win or lose doesn't matter. What matters is you put up good fight, earn respect, right? So Johnny and Mr. Miyagi kind of in the first movie had the same idea. In Johnny's thoughts, he was teasing Daniel, but it was a respectful type of thing. It was the way that you handled situations. If you were bullying somebody, there was respect involved. There was honor involved by going in and getting in their face and seeing if they're going to react and if they're going to stand up to you. And Miyagi understood that and said, listen, you want to stop these bullies, you earn the respect by fighting back. So you can see kind of the yin and yang, light side, dark side of the force thing going on there as well. And so, but I found it really interesting that at the same time when Johnny's teaching these lessons about honor in standing up for yourself and the bullying aspect, you have Daniel on the outside kind of dishonorably going behind Johnny's back. Instead of going through him and doing things, he's going behind the back to try to get him kicked out with using Armand to try to raise his rent and do things like that. And his wife was so great because Daniel finally realizes how much of a douchebag he's really being when she's like, did you even think about the other tenants in the strip mall? And you see there are multiple tenants in this episode where you see the effect that it's having. You see it from the pawn shop owner who's not able to give as much money to Johnny because his rent was raised. You see it in the convenience store owner as well. So it's having an effect on multiple people. And it's not until Daniel goes and sees Miyagi's gravesite that he kind of realizes how out of balance he truly is.
And that's what's cool about her character is how she's really insightful. And like I said from the beginning, I think she was the one that was leveling him down. She, like you said, she's the one that acknowledged what was happening, and like you're absolutely correct. He was the one that was kind of being, hiding behind the keyboard or his pen or his checkbook, you could say, instead of just going up and confronting your enemy or bullying or however you want to look at it. And you can't look at this as anything else besides bullying. Daniel is not trying to shut down Cobra Kai in preservation of true karate or helping these kids or anything like that. He has a vendetta against Cobra Kai, and he has a vendetta against Johnny. So when he goes behind trying to manipulate that with his business stature, he's hiding behind all of that. Now, at the same time, Johnny's teaching his students to confront their bullies, confront their enemies, and be creative and become bad at. Now, that's the interesting thing is when Daniel is trying to justify what he's doing to his wife, she's like, yeah, he's an a-hole. become one. Don't let him turn you into one. And that's what triggers him, where you're saying he's like contemplating what he's actually doing and how he's not acting like himself, even though from the audience, and especially me, I'm like, yeah, he's always been like that. He goes and he talks to Miyagi's grave and he says, I've always been hot-headed and I'm letting my anger get the best of me and get out of control. And that's where he reflects and remembers the lesson on balance. I like that, but it doesn't seem to go very far in the next few episodes, which is what one of my complaints was. I do like that he gets Robbie involved. We'll talk more about that in a second, but how when Robbie gets involved, it seemed you can kind of see where Daniel was struggling, trying to jump on getting that balance back like he was determined to do, because he couldn't get anyone to come play with him in this dojo. He couldn't get anyone to do it. He can't just open up a school because that's not what Miyagi-Do was. So he was just trying to get people he cared about, including coworkers, to come do karate with him. And it wasn't until Robbie came and showed some interest, even though it was an ulterior motive, that he got excited. And I think that's why it was a delay in his getting that balance. But it didn't last very long. Daniel still goes right back to being hot-headed and everything as soon as it comes up to the tournament.
So it's funny you bring that up. So it's another comedic moment. I loved when he goes to his friend who's working with him at the thing, and he goes, "Are you asking me as a friend or as my boss?" "As a friend, I'm busy. As your boss, I'm sick."
He's like, "I'm sick."
Yeah.
I love that.
But going back, there's a really a good scene that I really loved was the scene when they see each other in the convenience store. I feel like at that point everybody is in their most out of balance. The whole theme of this is balance, right? So in the first movie, both Johnny and Daniel are out of balance, right? Daniel's getting beat up all the time and bullied. Johnny is out of balance because of everything going on with Ali, and he's taking it out on Daniel. I love the symbolism. If you go back and watch the episode, he's just gone to the pawn shop. They're not giving him any money, and I love that too. When the pawn guy's like going through the calculator, he's like, "Okay, if you had 60,000 more of these, maybe we could work out a deal."
He pulls out he's like, "Or how about the Nintendo?" He's like, "Well, first of all, that's an Atari."
Yeah, yeah. Or when he's in the Sports Illustrated, he goes, "If this was mint, I'd throw you $5 and sell it for 10. But this is well used,
well loved." Yeah, he says it's well loved.
But I love the symbolism because after he does that, he goes to the dojo and he walks back to the mini mart and he goes for the beer. And when he goes, there's none left, and he has to dig real deep to find the last one. And there's such a beautiful symbolism to that because at that time Johnny was at his lowest level. He has been most humbled. And if you think about it, Johnny needed to be balanced too in the first movie. Him losing brought him into balance. It brought him down a peg. He earned, he respected Daniel. And now they were it almost felt like they were balanced in the first movie, and now they've kind of gone back this way. That's why it's counterbalance, right? They're now Daniel's at his highest peak, like Johnny was. Johnny's at his lowest peak, like Daniel was. And now it needs to kind of come back the other way. That's the scene where they're at the highest and lowest, because Daniel comes in and he's just a total jerk. "You know what? Put this beer on my tab. He looks like he's had a long day." What a jerk thing to say after you just basically got this guy who's already at his wit's end and it's at his last breath to just kind of screw him over. And that's when he finally realizes and goes, which I think, going to the Miyagi gravesite, I thought that scene there was the most beautiful scene in the whole series, because it really brought the spirit of Mr. Miyagi into the series better than
the flickering moment that it lasted.
Yeah, and I think that it reminded me a lot of some other scenes in other movies where a gravesite scene was really highlighted how important they were to the character. I think of Rocky going to Rocky Balboa to Adrian's gravesite. I think of Forrest Gump going to Jenny's grave at the end of the movie, and then Forrest Gump, and you see how these characters who are supporting characters to the story are such an anchor to the main character. They're almost inseparable, and that's the way Miyagi is to Daniel. And I think I shared this in our overall episode. I love the way that they did the throwback, and that was the best thing about this whole show, is that they do the flashbacks and stuff. And a lot of the times in other shows, it just, when they do the flashbacks, it just looks stupid because they do it all wrong, and it just looks cheesy and dumb, and it looks like they're purposely trying to get
your marketing game, yeah.
Right. And this, they did it perfectly. It shoots back as a flashback, and it's something that you can understand the flashback. And when he gets back there, I mean, when he looks at it's almost like he's envisioning himself when he's sitting there saying, "Yes, I understand." He's in the same position and he's using the same words he used when he said it to Mr. Miyagi in the first movie. So
in the car, yeah.
And him trimming the bonsai, and the bonsai being kind of too big. He mentions, "I know it's been a few months since I've been here." You can tell that he's so out of balance, and it was just a beautiful moment. So
I agree, and I think that's what brought, like you said, he was kind of at the peak of his, as you said, douchiness, where he was finally brought down a little bit. Johnny, on the other hand, was at his lowest, and then by the end of this episode, where he has all the students lined up at the door and was about to abuse them in the next episode, they both kind of level out in the middle again. But they're not the only ones that were balanced in this episode, and I kind of went through and I made a list of the main characters, thinking about the changes that I saw just in this episode alone. That's why I love the name of the episode. But if you look at Johnny and Daniel, like you said, Johnny was poor and struggling even at the lowest of his finances, where he couldn't even afford. He didn't have any beer left. He went back and he had the last one. And that, like you said, the empty fridge was symbolic of how he's like at the end of his desperation, where he doesn't have anything. He's about to call it quits, and to the point where Miguel had to talk him into taking on what's her name, the fat girl,
Aisha.
Aisha. Right. Aisha. Yeah, he almost. Sorry.
Calls Miss Robinson throughout the whole show. Yeah.
Right. But where Miguel had to talk him into her, which goes back to my point, we were trying to figure out why he was handing out flyers in Encino. Yeah. And Encino is because they had money. And Miguel's point was, you got to keep her in because her family has money. And that convinced him, and then he took her on, and then she became one of the ones that grew in the Cobra Kai. Now, that showed his level of desperation, and then he bounced back and had students. John or Daniel, on the other hand, he was way up here, and like you said, he kind of came down when his wife kind of humbled him. He went and had a little session with Miyagi's tomb or grave, and that restored his the lesson about balance in his mind and refreshed his motivation to get that back in his life. And we see them cleaning out the dojo by the end and doing his horrible kata. By the way, just mentioning the kata. Go ahead.
What's cool about that before you go into the kata is I thought it was also really cool because we haven't really talked about the fight, which was an awesome fight scene. It was really great to see Miguel get the payoff and beat up those guys. Earn that respect that he needed from Kyler and all of his buddies, and seeing that the whole school was behind him, standing up for himself, and also seeing Sam look up at him and kind of start having the hots for him was great too. But you see that at the end of that episode is when he starts getting the students, and I found it really cool to see that it was at that moment when he sees all those students and says, "It looks like we're in business." It immediately cuts to Daniel opening up the kata, opening up the dojo and building the dojo and kind of putting it back together. So while Cobra Kai is starting to grow, Miyagi-Do is also coming back and starting to grow at the same time. So, that counterbalance is still going on. That's why they
dark thing, yeah.
Every one of these episodes is named perfectly too. I love that, So
yeah.
So what did you think of? You're talking about characters. I thought Robbie in this episode was the most sympathetic that he is in the entire series.
In this series, and that's the thing. This is where he's kind of in a gray area. And his counterbalance was, it showed previously his discontent for Johnny. He's not interested in relationship with him. When he's on the phone with the the principal of the school, and Johnny was like, let me talk to him. And he's like, dude, you're a loser. I don't want anything to do with you. He leaves school, and then the principal can't get a hold of his mother and doesn't know what's going on with him. He goes to confront him and his friends are there in his apartment in the other episode. And then Robbie just is like, just get out of here. He just shuns him from his life. But then in this episode, you see him looking up Johnny's the profile on the dojo that Miguel helped him set up. And I don't know if did you read the screen, what it says about Johnny?
A little bit, but I can't remember.
Yeah, so I paused it. Let me read what it says real quick. Sensei Johnny Lawrence is a former All-Valley Tournament champion. In fact, he didn't lose a single point his junior year. He currently resides in Reseda, and when he's not teaching karate, you can find him jamming out to 80s rock in his Firebird. I think that's hilarious because Miguel doesn't know anything else about him because that's essentially his life, although he could have put drinking beer, but that's it. I just thought that was really funny. But the interesting thing was Robbie looking at it. Robbie had Johnny on his mind, and he looked at it because he saw the flyer previously that his dad was reopening the Cobra Kai dojo.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You also see in this episode that Robbie is a lot like Johnny. You learn in episode 6 what Johnny was kind of like at the beginning, and that Robbie is searching for direction anywhere. He seems very hard when Johnny's there initially because he's angry, but really he's looking for direction. You see it in his relationship with his mom. You see in this episode he has his mom and he says, hey, you want to rent a movie, eat popcorn? He wants to spend time with somebody, and his mom really doesn't have the time for him, and it hurts him. And you can see when
that's his disdain for her and his rejection that he feels because she's busy hanging out with guys. And he made a few snide remarks about that, and that's when he was just like Johnny, turning to his music to shun out all this behavior, all this chaos in his life that's damaging him.
Right, and you can also see, when she brings up that Johnny came and saw her, that he was interested in what he said. And when she brings up, hey, he wanted to come and, he was saying something about you coming and living with him, he was actually interested in that, which spurred him to go on the Cobra Kai website. I think that the character or the actor who plays Robbie plays the loneliness really well. There was a lot of subtleties in the way he was looking, the way that he was saying, he was using his face to exhibit that loneliness. I thought he did a great job with that. The acting in this, Barnett, even though I know you hate Daniel LaRusso, the character, you have to admit that everybody really played their parts really well.
Yeah, and that's all it is. It's the character Daniel. It's not Ralph Macchio. Ralph Macchio is doing a really good job, and I just watched Karate Kid 3 yesterday, and I hate him even worse than that one. We'll talk about that another time, but. This episode did bring a little bit of that back, where Daniel always does get his head screwed on right by the end of the show. This one, he did the same thing. Robbie turns around and he has the flip as well, where he is resenting Johnny. He adores. You can tell he does adore his mom. I don't think he's just desperate for affection and attention anywhere. He cares about his mom just like Johnny cared about his mom in that dysfunctional family. And then that's why he looks at the dojo, he's researching, he's thinking about his dad, he thinks about what his mom said about his dad, and then he goes to the dojo when Miguel is getting his gi, and Johnny says, this is the most special, or the best, the only thing I have left or whatever, and he gives it to him and he embraces him like a father. And that just destroys whatever adoration was left in Robbie for Johnny. So that repels him off to go try and get involved with not Ralph Macchio, with Daniel. And he even says, my dad's going to freak out when he sees that I'm working for him. And that's the only motive. The karate spin in there, when he goes and starts looking into the karate with him, that's where you start to try and decide, is Robbie learning karate? Is he actually becoming a acolyte to the traditions that Daniel's trying to teach him? Is he actually become converted to Miyagi-Do karate? Or is this just a really effective way to upset his dad? What do you think?
I think initially obviously initially it was all about just trying to piss his dad off, right? But I think as he went forward, you could tell in the way that he did things, and maybe it'll turn out to be just an elaborate scheme. But I think that over time, I think that it became more than that, and that he actually liked being a part of the LaRusso team. You see that in, I think it's episode 7, when they finally start, when his friends want to break into the dojo. Was that in 6?
Right.
That wasn't in 6.
That was 7, I think.
Yeah,
I think.
So you see that he doesn't really, he could have broken in, but he didn't want to. He's starting to change. And that's another thing I thought you mentioned, Karate Kid 3. It's so prevalent to me that the whole purpose of these young students is to show you, and you see it in part 3, that the teachings, the way that they're presently constituted, will take anybody and change them into the type of person that Daniel or Johnny was. So you can see Robbie is basically Johnny Jr. And he becomes more like Daniel and more like Miyagi through the teaching. And Daniel and Johnny, neither one of them are perfect teachers they're imperfect teachers to the spirit of their respective dojos. They're not Miyagi and John Kreese. They're imperfect to that. But the results come out more like the teachers than they do the original teachers than they do Daniel and Johnny. I feel like Robbie turns more into a Mr. Miyagi type character, and Miguel certainly turns more into a John Kreese than he does a Johnny. And
which is a spin that didn't translate well enough in that short amount of time, but we'll get there.
Sure, but you can see there that Miguel is Daniel Jr., Robbie is Johnny Jr., and you get from that if Johnny had been with Mr. Miyagi and Daniel had been with John Kreese, they would be on opposite sides of where they were in the original Karate Kid. And you see that in Karate Kid 3, because Daniel, as he's doing the Cobra Kai lessons, now learn the original beginning lessons of actual Cobra Kai, he will turn into a Cobra Kai, a hot-headed, want to strike first, want to strike hard.
Right.
Strikes first.
You almost, I thought was interesting about that, as you mentioned those lessons, was he starts teaching them the same thing, and then it shows him as a kid watching John Kreese teaching the kids even way back then. Those 3 things, and that's the whole thing: strike first, strike hard, no mercy. But if you think about what he said in this episode when he's talking to her, he says striking hard means giving it your all. Now, if you think about it, Miyagi also gave that exact same lesson when he was talking about the grapes, when he was talking to him about the difference between, if he wants to learn karate or if he's just going to kind of partially learn. He says, no matter what, you have to decide on, one side of the fence or the other. And he said that has to do with everything in life. But I really like that. I thought about that when I watched this episode again, that there's a lot of the same principles exist. Striking first is the one difference. Miyagi, that we've talked about before, is more defensive, and John even says later on that the best defense is more offense. So that's the contradiction there. But the second one, striking hard, I don't think Miyagi's traditions were really opposed to that. It's just translated and communicated a little differently. That you need to put your all into whatever you're doing. And that's all Johnny's trying to do with these kids, is trying to teach them. Yeah, he's trying to teach them to be, a bad A and everything, but he wants them to shed the skin like a cobra and come out, a better and stronger person.
Sure. I think that the big differences are Miyagi-Do is passive and Cobra Kai is aggressive. Just think of the names, right? When you're talking about, John Kreese, when he starts doing the cadence that he does with the kids, the first thing he says is, what are we learning here? And they say, the way of the fist, sir, the way of the fist.
Right.
Miyagi in the first movie says karate means empty hand. So you got versus an empty hand, right? So you can see one's passive, one's aggressive, and that's the big difference. I don't think the strike hard is the difference. I think the strike first and the no mercy is the difference.
Right.
So I think you're right. I think that strike hard is right there with both of them.
I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, definitely. So this episode, I agree, it's one of the better episodes. It marks a turning point for both of the main characters, because here you're seeing that all of the teachings have come together for Miguel, and it all comes together in the fight. He comes in and tells Johnny everything was coming together. I was striking first, I was striking slithering, everything just kind of came together, and he goes, "Wait a minute, are you telling me that you took all the teachings that I taught you, and then you used them to beat the crap out of those guys?" And then that's when he gives him the karate gi, and the bond between Miguel and Johnny. And you can't. I couldn't. The first time I saw that, and then I saw Robbie come, I really felt that moment. Like, it's very rare that I see these movies often more critically than I do. I don't feel things a lot. Maybe it's the fact that I just have an emotional connection because of my own childhood to seeing this movie. But I really felt for Robbie when he saw that. And I couldn't help but, I mean, in this series, you can't help but feel everything that Johnny's doing. Robbie should be the one that he's doing this with. When he's going to talk to Miguel's mom, it should be, it should be Robbie's mom that he's saying that to. When he's giving the gi to him, it should be Robbie. And Robbie feels that when he looks in there and he says, what a jerk. That should be me, And now he's going over to, he goes go into Daniel. So I thought that was cool. And the part where he goes in and he, at the end of the series where he's going in and interviewing for the job, you're like, oh, this is not good. This is good. So
that's what flips his counterbalance. Miguel had his counterbalance, like you just said. He was defeated twice by these bullies. He was beat up. He was left for dead. And he came out through the skeleton and then never die, or whatever the last episode was. Cobra Kai Never Dies, or whatever it was. So he bounced back, and then this time in the cafeteria when they're picking on Sam, he steps up for the third time, and the counterbalance is now, like you said, all his training and everything's come together where he defeats the bad guys. And the other counterbalance is the first time Sam doesn't notice him at all, even when he made his first attempt to talk to her, and now she smiles at him, and this is the beginning of their flirtations and then their relationship. But yeah, that's what brings him down. The other thing in that scene that I thought was really cool was what's her name? I need to write it down. The fat girl.
Aisha Robbie.
Aisha. So when Aisha, she's sitting there at the table by herself, and Sam walks in, and Sam, who wasn't full on like doing anything against her, it's just Aisha now has this mentality of the Cobra Kai. And so the first lesson, strike first. That was her first lesson that she learned that day, and was having Miguel attack her. So Sam walks in, looks at this empty table, and she's sitting there, and she's like, "Can I sit? I need to sit somewhere." And she's like, "No." She repels her, and she gets all attitude and mean to her, and she's like, "Get out of here." And but she initiated that conversation. She's like, "What are you doing?" And so that shows that she's already got this aggression building up in her to retaliate against all these bullies, where she saw this neglect from Sam, and she associates that with the bullying that she was getting from Sam's friends. So I saw that as the counterbalance to her, which is just the start of her path in stepping up and defending herself, just like Johnny was telling her to do.
Sure, and Sam's counterbalance is now she was over with all the rich kids, and now she's kind of being humbled.
Now she's back in the middle, yeah.
So I thought that was interesting too, because Sam never really was the one. She was kind of stuck in an awkward position, but Sam should have been defending her. I feel like Miss Aisha Robinson was justified in that Sam should have been defending her and not been hanging out with the friends, especially after they sent that video of her eating all the food at the dance. That was just wrong, and Sam needs to own up to that, and this is kind of the way it ends up, and it's unfortunate, but that's how it goes. So everybody's here in this episode is having, they're all kind of being humbled or building confidence, and they're all kind of coming together. And this episode is such a good transition episode for everybody involved to kind of get to the second part of the series, which is where everybody starts building up. So
I love it. Were there any other, did you notice any other Easter eggs? The only one I noticed was when Daniel was setting up the dojo, he hung the first and second rule of karate was in there. Did you notice anything else?
Well, I did. I was wondering. So he hung a couple of pictures of Mr. Miyagi up, and the one that they really focused on, and I couldn't quite put it on, and maybe you or maybe a viewer who's watching this can comment and let me know, but I was wondering what the significance was of that picture, because that picture, if I'm not mistaken, is a picture at the end of Karate Kid 3. Because the end of Karate Kid 3 is when he hugs Mr. Miyagi, and then he raises Mr. Miyagi's arm. And so
I thought it was the one where he's in the floral gown. I thought that was the picture he hung up.
No, the picture he hung up was of them. It seemed like at the last tournament when he raises Mr. Miyagi's hand. So he hangs up one picture of just Mr. Miyagi, which was kind of cool because it was almost set up in the same way as Mr. Miyagi's dojo in Okinawa, which had the original Miyagi who started karate.
Right, in the family line. That's why I thought it was the traditional gown or gi that he was wearing. That matched the theme of how they set up the dojo, was having your master's portraits there. I thought that's all it was.
There was that picture, and then there was a second picture, and the second picture was Mr. Miyagi and Daniel at the end of of Karate Kid 3 when he's raising his arm. The only thing I can think of is that was a symbol of Daniel continuing the legacy from the third movie by Obi. Right. But if there's some other significance, I just thought it was interesting that was the photo they selected, because there's so many cool. I mean, if you look online and you look at posters and things, all the different pictures you can get, that's not really one of the more popular ones. A lot of them are the more popular ones of them in their garb from Karate Kid 2 when they're in the palace, or something from the first one when he's doing the crane kick and things like that. So I thought
when he was in his gi in the dojo, I was about to call out that it was the wrong gi, because I said the patch on the back of his gi in the original movie had a square embroidery on the back with the bonsai tree. This one, it had a circle, and I was like, oh, he's got the wrong gi, and I was like calling it out for a technicality. But the other one's hanging up on the wall, so I'm like, dang it, I gotta caught him on something.
Now, episode 6 is called Quiver, and I love the way that they started with the 3 definitions, because you can see the different definitions all being played out in this episode. So the first one is tremble or shake with slight rapid motion. You can see that I thought that was more like Sam kind of falling for Miguel. She's checking out his Facebook, and what she's at the pool. She's starting to kind of feel a little fluttery heart stuff for him. Okay. A slight trembling movement or sound, especially caused by fear. And you can tell that a lot of the kids in the Cobra Kai are fearful of Johnny and his method of teaching. And then a group of Cobras, you see everybody, they're starting to come together as a group.
As well as the bullies. It shows that for the first time that now they have a different reaction when they see Miguel, and that's commented on several times in this episode.
Right, definitely. I like this episode too because this is the first pre-Karate Kid Johnny experience you get to see. This is where you get to see the first experience Johnny had with Cobra Kai as a young kid, a kid who clearly didn't have many friends. He walks in, and I thought it was really cool how he comes up to the dojo, and the first thing he sees is the guys with bikes outside and then going in. And, in the next movie, him and all his Cobra Kai friends, they all have bikes, right? So he just kind of thinks it's cool, and he goes in, and they played. You could tell that was sound from the original movie of John Kreese talking about doing the cadence of The Way of the Fist and Strike First, Strike Hard, No Mercy. That was all stuff from that first.
I have one complaint about that, which I'm just thrown off by. When he steps back and little kid Johnny looks up at the dojo and the big sign, it says Cobra Kai at the top. On both sides of the sign and in the graffiti and everything, it has the same fist logo for the All Valley tournament. Why would the All Valley tournament be a sponsorship? I mean, but on the official board for the dojo.
I didn't notice that. That's interesting. Yeah,
it's just, unless at one point they were sponsored or something, or maybe that's an affiliation from one organization, different than like a franchise owner. So I was like, I don't know if they didn't pay attention or if that was a continuity issue where they put whatever we'd recognize up on the board, but that doesn't match.
Was that exactly the same way as it was in the first movie?
I don't know. I don't think so, because I'd have to go look at it.
Because I felt like they tried to make that as accurate. I would be surprised if they didn't make it exactly the same as the first movie. And it might have been because, I mean, at the time, Cobra Kai, obviously, I mean, they've won every, like in the last couple of years.
Right.
Them. And you see now with the All Valley Karate, under 18 karate tournament.
Yeah, they had the poster advertising in the dojo. And I always, as a kid, I always thought that was kind of weird. They're like, that they're like so proactive about advertising this tournament. But again, it's a huge thing in the city, so that makes sense.
Right, so sure. So yeah, I mean, I guess that all makes sense. I also thought, again, the comedy here was so funny. When all the kids are lined up, and I love the first thing he says to the snarky kid. I can't remember his name, but I love when he goes, "Nice shirt," and he goes, "I'm joking. It sucks." That's like,
he's like, thanks. Like, okay.
I think that's probably my favorite comedic line of the whole thing. That, and then when he looks at the kid, and he goes, "Gosh, I feel like a virgin just looking at you."
Yeah, that's a kid. The other calls the other guy tits, and it's just like,
yeah. So
it's so mean. He's so horrible. But again, this translates into what he's teaching them. He's messing with them. He's not messing with them, like joking with them. He's serious, but he just doesn't have a lot of tolerance for anything. Like anything they can't pick down or rip on. That's what his mentality is in Cobra Kai, because he's trying to teach them that, you know, the world isn't going to forgive you. And his biggest the biggest person in that whole sequence is Eli, or Hawk, where he's showing them that the world is going to treat them like this, and the world already treats them like this. He needs them to stop being losers and stop being, you know, wusses and kids with these defects and everything, and just snap or grow out of it. And what's the line he says to Hawk? He told him the thing that drove him.
Flip the script.
Flip the script, yeah. So he told him he had to flip the script, and that's where he left, and he came back. He said, well, there's one more quitter. He came back with a Hawk, and he earned Johnny's respect. He didn't fix his face. All he did was drew attention and became something that was more significant or stood out more. And, you know, Johnny's talking about being a badass and everything, and that's not necessarily, you know, the positive thing to take out of it. But you do want to overcome and compensate for problems. And even if they're physical things, people are more than their physical any, I don't know how to say, their appearances, whatever issues anyone has with their appearance. And that's what Miguel tries to teach him, and tries to tell Johnny, you can't rip on these kids for that because they don't have a lot of control. And he's like, the world's not going to let up, so they need to become, you know, strong on the inside, or else they can't be strong on the outside. And I think that's all good. Those are all good, strong messages.
You know, you see, you start. This episode helps you see what Johnny and Kreese and everybody was doing to Daniel in a different light, because he talks about, and he does it in his final monologue as well, he talks about that there is a purpose to his teasing. There's a purpose behind the bullying. It's not to tear them down necessarily. It's to strengthen them, to let them know, like, you know, you can't expect, like, I love the thing when he's talking to the snarky kid again, when he calls him lip, and he goes, you shouldn't really make fun of the guy's appearance. And he goes, so I'm not supposed to mention his lip at all? You can't expect the people out in the world that are going to just do what they're supposed to do. And he said, if you can't handle this, how are you going to handle an elbow to the face, right? Like, and that's
if you want to be something other than a nerd with a lip, or sorry, if you want to be something other than a nerd with a scar on his lip, then you got to flip the script. That's when he says that. Yeah. And he's talking to the whole class about that. But I thought when he said when he was defending himself, when Eli was there, he said, "Can we, change the topic?" He says, "If you don't want me to call you lip, then don't have
a weird lip." I also like how he says to him, he goes, "Oh, that's what it was like after surgery? You should go see that. It was worse." Yeah.
He's so funny, but it's so funny.
But you know what, though?
It's not funny. Bullying is not funny.
But the thing is you're noticing Kreese's military style. If you remember, Kreese is a war hero. So he's learning his karate through the lens of the military back in I think it was either Vietnam or
Vietnam.
Korea. Yes, Vietnam. So when he was in Vietnam, was it Vietnam or Korea?
Well, Miyagi was Vietnam.
No.
I don't know about Kreese. What?
Miyagi was World War II.
Then it was Vietnam. Because in Karate Kid 3 they were talking about, I swear, I'm pretty sure it's Vietnam. Anyway, go ahead.
The point is that you see, if you've seen the movie Full Metal Jacket, the style is very similar to the drill sergeant in Full Metal Jacket, just kind of on a PG light way, right? So you're seeing a lighter version of a military style of tearing you down to build you back up, and you're seeing that he tears them all down and builds them back up in a more confident image, and that's what he was trying to do with Lip, or Hawk, or when he transitions into Hawk. So there was a great.
One interesting thing about that comment is that Martin Kove, who played Kreese, I heard in an interview where he said, trying to justify and kind of get his head wrapped around why Kreese was the way he was. He internalized it playing the character. He said that he always imagined that Kreese was someone that had always been very competitive and he was always the best. And in the trophies in front of the dojo, it showed that he was a karate champion in the military, in the Army for those couple of years. And he's always been used to winning. That's why he's got that competitive edge that it's like no matter what, you have to win. And that's what built up that mentality. And who knows about his background that we could learn about in later episodes, besides his relationship with Terry Silver. We can learn more about his childhood. It may have been an abusive or dysfunctional manner, just like Johnny's was, or more about what happened in the military, what happened in his establishing or getting into karate, whatever it was, that built him to be so hard. And he wasn't as abusive. It was just hard. And it was also building up strength and discipline, the same way Johnny is with these kids. But he's abusing them in kind of a sarcastic and in a real way that they're used to versus Kreese. Kreese was just cold and hard. I think that is the main difference in what the way their demeanor was in the dojo. But Martin Kove kind of addressed it. He felt that that's what he was. He wasn't a bad person. He just was used to having to win.
Yeah, and the other thing about this is, we've talked about this being kind of a commentary on millennials as well, which I think is very well done. But you can also find that Robbie can't handle, any sort of hazing either. He gets hazed in this episode by Louis. Louis tells him to go to Porsche. And as soon as he gets any sort of blowback from Daniel, he's like, screw you guys, I'm out of here, and leaves. Like, you just go and quit. And it takes Daniel to go by and stop him and be like, hey, come on, I'm
That's a good point. There's that entitlement, even as a lowlife and the upcoming criminal that he is. He's like, he's like, screw this. I'm not going to deal with this. I'm not going to get yelled at by my boss for he was trying to do something good to do something right, because he actually cared about getting a shirt with his name on it. He wanted to be established. He wants to get in there. I think he's enjoying being, good, and he wanted recognition for that. He wanted to be better at his job, even though he's in there for a wrong motive. He wants to do well. And then having Daniel, who he was there to impress, that was his whole motive in coming, was to get in with Daniel. And then Daniel's the one that comes and yells at him. He's like, what are you doing? We're turning on a car in a full showroom. He's like, screw this. And he leaves. He's like, well, plan foiled. I'm done. And there's that entitlement that he's like, you can't talk to me like that, and I'm not going to put up with it. And he just walks out. It's still a flea that he does, but yeah, you're right. Until Daniel comes and pulls him back in, he can't handle the hazing.
Right. And the thing later on in the episode, again by Louis, to take the sales report to him, and it ends up being a dirty magazine, right? And in that one, you can see that he's kind of lightened up a little bit. He's just like, Louis, and just kind of joking around about it. But he's got that same issue, that the other kids have, in that they can't handle the little bit of hazing that's going on. So a little Easter egg thing that I caught in that scene where he goes outside and he tells him, where'd you grow up? And he said, I grew up in North Valley or whatever it was. It's obviously a poorer part of town. And he said, I lived in Reseda. He goes, I thought you came for money. And he says, things aren't always what they look like. And the way he smirked and the way he said that, I felt like he was almost kind of trying to do what Mr. Miyagi would say, because Mr. Miyagi says to him, you remember, Daniel was very surprised when he went to his house and he saw his house and how beautiful it was and all these cars and saying, oh, look at all this stuff. And he goes, oh, well, things aren't always what they seem, right? So it's very kind of some parody there as well in the relationship.
Good catch.
Yeah, so that was pretty interesting. That things aren't always what they seem. Another thing I liked, going back to Hawk, I thought this was a hilarious comment when he goes, what, are you one of those special kids? And he goes, well, my doctor says I might be on the spectrum. And he goes, I don't know what that is, but get off it.
But again, that's in the same, dialogue where he says, Cobra Kai is to build strength, or, that's what it's about. And just like throwing Miguel's, what's it called? The thing with your asthma.
Oh, the inhaler?
Yeah. And it's just like when he threw Miguel's inhaler in the first episode, he's like, you're here, you're disciplined, you're gonna do better. I don't care about all these worldly, not real, existing health issues and things, and emotional and mental things that people struggle with that are existing things that are real. He's like, I don't care about any of that stuff. And you're in the dojo, you're gonna just toughen up and do it my way. And that just carries on with each of the kids. Same thing with the girl. He didn't want to treat her. He's like, if you're gonna be strong, then fight her. Beat her up. And he's like, again, the girl. He's like, you said they're equal, just take her. And then he just doesn't. He doesn't. I don't know. He doesn't cater to anything, and he's not like, oh, I'm in transition, trying to learn more about these millennials and try and condition, or conform to their their needs. He doesn't care. He's like, this is how it is. This is what I'm teaching. This is what I'm doing. You can either come or you can quit. And he does kind of humble himself a little bit when he's like, I was a little hard on him. He's like, I'm not going to apologize though. I'm not going to apologize because the world's not going to care either. He's not going to care if it's your first day or whatever. And that's what Hawk Walk said, because he's a snake. And he needs them to blossom out of being losers to become badass.
Yeah, you do see that he does kind of cater a little bit, because there's that scene after that first fight where that first thing where Hawk leaves and he goes, oh no, another quitter. And then he goes outside into the office, and Miguel kind of tells him, he says, I love this. He goes, those losers are my friends. And he goes, well, that kind of fits, right? But then Miguel kind of tells him, he says, you just don't know what it's like to be us. And I thought, again, the acting in this is so great, because the look that William Zabka gives as Johnny Lawrence there, you can tell that he's realizing, it snaps in his head, he does know what it's like. Because when he goes, then they go the flashback when he's looking at the Walkman later, and he has the flashback back to his to Sid and his mom, when Sid's saying he's a loser, he's getting in fights, he's a social reject, he
doesn't have any friends.
Doesn't have any friends, and he realizes that he's actually even though he's saying these aren't the Cobra Kai kids, these are losers, he realizes, wait a minute, I was one of those kids, and look at what I came out of it with. And that's when he kind of realizes, okay, these aren't losers. They may be losers in his mind, but they can be Cobra Kai. And that's when you get that great monologue about, I was just like you. And I love the way he does it, because you can see some of his insecurity in this, because he goes, I used to be like you. I used to be the weird looking kid. And he goes, well, not that weird. I used to still hook up with hot babes.
Still hooked up with hot babes.
Yeah. But you also see that when he's talking about this stuff, been shedding his loser skin, he was talking about before he joined Cobra Kai, but he was also talking about before he opened Cobra Kai, because he's back there. He's got no friends. He's a loser. He doesn't, he's a social reject. He doesn't know anything. He doesn't know what a Facebook is. He's completely off the grid, not talking to anybody. And he talks about shedding your loser skin. You can see that as he grows the Cobra Kai, that loser skin that he's been harvesting for 34 years is being shed, especially when Hawk comes back. Because when Hawk comes back, you can see the immediate confidence boost that Johnny gets when he realizes, here's a kid who was, a total loser that is already turned and flipped the script, and he's seeing that it's already made a positive influence in his mind in Hawk's life. You can argue whether that was really positive or not, because Hawk kind of goes crazy in later episodes. But he kind of goes the Tommy way, and becomes kind of a nut. But he
does have this comment, like we'll talk about later on the beach, where that I think does justify his transition. But
right, so that last monologue was really awesome. I thought that.
I think what you just described, that goes back to the title of this episode, Quiver, because it describes the quiver as a short shaking. And he had that little moment, and he talks about these moments in his life where he kind of felt like that, but he comes right out of it and becomes stronger afterwards. And I think that's I think every character in this episode or quiver. Did I say quake?
You said quiver.
Okay. Anyway, but yeah, everyone in this episode quivers in one way or another with one of those definitions, including a gang of cobras, whatever the last one is. But I think seeing him realizing who he is and what he's been through, and recognizing that he does have something in common with these kids, but he wants to watch them become stronger and everything. And if that means some people quit and some people can't handle it, that's fine with him. And that's just a quiver in his attendance. But they're going to shake for a minute, and then they're going to come back and be stronger. Just brilliant names. I love the names. I thought about that. I'm going through it the second time.
Yeah. It was also very interesting how both Daniel and Johnny, through karate, are starting to refine themselves. Daniel, just in doing the kata and doing the karate and finding Robbie and starting to show him things, he's starting to refine himself. And you could tell that he needed that mentorship. He tried to find it with Sam, tried to find it with his son. I'm really curious where this thing is going to go with his son, because, man, that's got to be a struggle. That's a struggle that he's got to be dealing with. He's got a son that he's really not paying a lot of attention to, and so the son is kind of resorting to playing video games all the time. But you can see he's trying to find someone to mentor, and he finds it in Robbie, and that kind of help him refine himself. And then at the same time, Johnny, at the very end of the episode, when he turns around and says, "Are you ready to learn the way of the fist?" and everyone says, "Yes, Sensei," the smile he shows, he's finally refining himself. He's kind of getting back into his balance. So. Yeah,
the quiver is over. There's that little content that he has. He feels like he's got some strength again. He's got some strength behind. He's got an influence over these kids, and he's seeing a positive result. He just watched Eli come in. He's like, "See, this is the transition I'm talking about." He points him out. He says, "Fall in," and then he goes one by one, and he gives the dogma and deed to the kids. I think this episode ended really well. Getting set up for what's gonna, the turns that are about to start happening.
And I also thought it was cool how you could see how each one of the Cobra Kais, the new Cobra Kais, were all kind of in different levels of experience. Like Miguel had already kind of gone through it, and now he was already getting the respect at school. Kyler sees him and walks the other way because he's seeing that it works. Aisha Robinson is kind of in that she's getting aggressive, and she's at that, she calls everybody who quit a bunch of pussies. She's in that, and everyone else is kind of trying to catch up. And so, yeah, you're seeing all of that. I thought the scene where he beats up the snarky kid was kind of funny. It's not, you see that entitlement. These kids are like, it's not like he can really hurt us. It's not like he can really hurt us. That kind of entitlement that he just ripped out of all their faces as soon as he knocked them down. I thought that was pretty great too. So all around, 2 great episodes. I don't think we're going to really say anything bad about any of them. We've already kind of talked about what my least favorite episode was in the whole thing, and it just gets better from here.
The only other complaint I had was at the end of Counterbalance when Daniel starts doing his little kata. Oh, that was another Easter egg when he talks about how my kata, or the kata is the beginning.
Foundation.
The what? Foundation. It says that's the foundation of my karate, referring to Miyagi's family karate. But you can't explain that to the kid right there. That was another Easter egg. But he says, as he starts doing it, the music that plays right there should have been the Miyagi, training in the silhouette, doing the kata music, that soft Bill Conti flow, not the score from the tournament. It turns into a tournament fanfare right before he does the final kick. It just felt like it was a misplaced. It was fine because they wanted to have this big triumph at the end of the episode. You showed, look, I'm coming out of it. But the whole episode was about his getting balance back, counterbalance. And I think it would have fit better if it showed the passive calming, especially after his grief he just had at Miyagi's grave. Showing that he's remembering, reflecting back on those things. That's how he won the fight in the third one. I think the both scores were fine, but I think it would have been better if it was the passive, holistic music instead of the triumphant tournament fight music. Anyway, that's the only complaint I had.
So I liked hearing, but I think you're right because that music was designed in a way for a big crescendo with the crane kick in the movie. This didn't have that crescendo. You hear that big crash of the cymbals, and then it's just him doing the kata.
And then
yeah. It just didn't seem quite as climactic, I guess.
Yeah.
but it still was. I still enjoyed it just for the pureness.
Yeah. It didn't take me out of it the first time I watched it. This time I'm a little more critical. I'm like, that would have been a better taste of music. But anyway, totally. 2 great episodes.
Yeah, definitely. I thought these were great episodes, and this is a great. These episodes are the ones that kind of start you getting past the first act of the story, first half of the story, and into the next half of the story where things are kind of building up now to the tournament. And I think they did a very good job of that transition and kind of the parity between the two and seeing that balance come back for both of them. And it just keeps going on from there.
Yeah. So. Counterbalance, still my favorite episode. Episode 9 is the one that I enjoyed watching the most, but as far as a Karate Kid experience, this was the best one for sure to me.
Yeah, episode 9 is actually my favorite episode, and the reason is just because we'll talk more about it obviously when we get to the episode, but that was everything. It was everything that a Karate Kid fan would ever want to see. Johnny and Daniel sitting in a bar talking about the past, talking about things. It was such a great fanboy moment. It's like the greatest fan fiction you could ever imagine coming to life in the movie. It's so great, So we'll talk more about that and what we liked and didn't like about 9 when we get to that episode. But I think that these episodes are great, and I think we hit all the main details. So
yeah, for sure. Well, if we missed anything, if you had any other favorite parts or anything that you disagree with us on, just share in the comments below down there. But yeah, if you enjoyed this episode or if you enjoyed our discussions on the Cobra Kai series or anything else, then definitely click subscribe, like, follow, all that stuff, and get notifications when we have new episodes coming out. But we'll be talking about in our next episode, we'll be talking about episodes 7 and 8, and then the conclusion with 9 and 10.
Oh, I would also say, just based on the comments, I've been very appreciative of the comments and the conversation we're having in the comments for the last episodes. We've got a lot of great comments, a lot of great theories, a lot of great people talking about a lot of interesting things. Even some people who seem to have kind of an understanding of karate themselves and who have participated, who share a different aspect to it. So really appreciate it. Keep them coming. Tell us if there's anything that you think that we've missed, or if there's anything that you think will come up. Certainly as we go throughout this, especially when we get to 9 and 10, we'll definitely talk about things we want to see in season 2, because season 2 has been announced. It comes out in 2019, which is really exciting. We also know that Mike Barnes will be returning in season 2, so that's interesting. And I have some more thoughts on that as I thought through this a little bit more. And
I do too. We'll talk about it.
Especially now that you've rewatched part 3, I'm sure there's.
And now that I rewatched 3, I thought about it.
Yeah, and it in no way has to do with the fact that we've actually communicated with Mike Barnes on Twitter. So
we're not suddenly rooting for it, because there's reasons I don't think it works, but we'll talk about it. But that was really cool.
Yeah. So anyhow, okay, so that's great. So I'm looking forward to the next episodes. We hope you are too.
Yeah. But for right now, I am Tim Wild.
I am Josh Edlow.
And thanks again for watching Saints on Cinema. We'll catch you next time.